Today we have a great revenge story that takes place in detention. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, paternity fraud? Not here. My ex tried to pin her ex's child on me. I made sure she planned a wedding with her family, and then at the wedding rehearsal, I exposed her and walked away. I used to be entangled with one of the most vile families I have ever been unfortunate to meet. I know people could be horrible people, but this family behaved as though they were struggling to win the Horrible People Award. That was how evil they were. My ex-girlfriend and I started dating shortly after I was employed at a TV station owned by her father and his brother. I didn't even know who she was at the time we started dating. She was an intern in her last year of college, and that was my first job after college as I just graduated 4 months before. When I met her, I fell in love, and why not? She was beautiful and soft-spoken. I especially loved how soft-spoken she was, but I had no idea that behind all the soft outspokenness was a spoiled brat who thought everyone was on earth to hand things to her and do whatever she wanted. I walked up to her, dropped a few pickup lines, tried to make her interested. You know, I was a good-looking dude. I had just graduated from college, and not many young women would turn down a guy like me, so when she started to smile back and reciprocate, I knew she was hooked too. We hit it off and started going out on dates, but I did not realize who her father was until our third date. I just knew she drove a good car, and I figured she had a rich parent, but what I did not know was that her parents were that rich, or that her dad co-owned the establishment I worked in. To be honest, that took me by surprise, and I was very close to ending our relationship. I just did not want any kind of relationship where I'd have to walk on eggshells because my woman's father was my boss. I stepped back from our relationship a bit, but luckily, I thought, I was offered a better job elsewhere, so I quit my job at her dad's establishment and accepted the new job. As I started the new job, I resumed my relationship with her. We were going well for the first few months until I noticed how spoiled and entitled she was. It was like she lived in her own fairy tale world where she had to get whatever she wanted whenever she wanted it. Anyone who does not rise to the occasion of her needs hated her and was trying to sabotage her. She had several emotional meltdowns, and it was always over the smallest things. It was like dating a toddler. The tiniest inconvenience and even non-issues would have her picking up her phone and calling her mother for help. On one hand, I found her behavior to be extremely ridiculous, but on the other hand, I waved off my irritation as jealousy. Perhaps I just thought her concerns were ridiculous because I didn't grow up rich and didn't have parents I could call to fix whatever was wrong in my corner of the world. I also excused her extreme self-absorption because I was in love with her. It was hard to be mad at someone for being so absorbed in themselves when you're absorbed with them too. When we got together, she told me about her ex-boyfriend. The son of a famous actor and her were together for a long time, but the young man kept cheating on her and she got sick of his behavior, so she left him. After being together for nearly a year, she suddenly told me that she needed a break. I didn't see it coming because she was always the kind of person who never ever wanted a break. She always wanted to be around me, always wanted to be included in whatever I was doing, and what we argued about the most was my unavailability. I was genuinely surprised and disappointed when she said she wanted a break, but I agreed and stayed hopeful that she would fix whatever she was dealing with and come back to me. All through the break, I focused on my work and did the fun things I wanted to do alone and with my friends but could not do because she would always get in the way. 3 months after waiting to see if my ex would come back, I found out that she had in fact gone back to her ex-boyfriend, the actor's son. I was hurt, but I got over it quickly. I decided to see the bright side of everything. When we were together, I was always so exhausted from the needless drama she started everywhere she went. The endless parties her parents organized and constantly fussing over her the way she wanted. 3 more months later, my ex reached out to me and said she wanted to talk. We did talk, and she said many things, most of which I knew were lies. She lied that her father and her ex's dad wanted both of them to get married to strengthen the family. It was a ridiculous lie and it made no sense. It wasn't the 1880s. Plus, my ex was the kind of person who did whatever she wanted. There was no way her parents would make her go back to her ex if she didn't want him. Still, I indulged her, pretended to care, and listened attentively. She probably thought I was stupid enough to buy her story, but I just wanted her to allow me to get some. That evening, she went home with me and we hooked up. It surprised me how quick she was to agree to go home with me and how quickly she initiated when we got home. I started to wonder why she did all that, but I soon understood why. 3 weeks later, she called me to say that she'd gotten tested and found out that she was pregnant. I'm not a gynecologist or an expert when it comes to women and their reproductive system, but something just did not feel right. It didn't feel like she was pregnant with my child. Plus, the way she tried to sneak back into my life was suspicious. I asked what she wanted to do and she had another meltdown and started to talk about how her dad would be so mad that she was having a child outside of wedlock and how we had to get married. When I agreed to marry her, she could not believe her luck. She was so surprised that it was hard for her to conceal her surprise. The expression on her face confirmed to me that I wasn't the father of her child. The actor's son probably got her pregnant and didn't want to be involved, so she tried to pin it on me. Before I had time to think about what that even meant for us, her father began to invite me to golf games. I was meeting the creme de la creme of society. Business cards were exchanged, ideas were exchanged, and then I got another job offer. One that tripled my current position at the time. That job changed my life forever, but I could have never have gotten it without her dad's influence. Being the fiancé of a powerful man's daughter came with its benefits, and I intended to milk it all. I heavily suspected that the baby wasn't mine, but even if it was mine, there was no way I would settle with a woman who'd tell me she needed a break when what she needed was space to sleep with her ex. It even still shocks me to this day that they all believe that I could ever be okay with that. It just shows how deluded many people can be. My ex's mom was eager for the wedding to happen very fast. Now that I think about it, she probably knew what her daughter was up to and was trying to conceal it. Both of her parents probably knew. As the wedding drew closer, my reputation blossomed. Her father's name opened doors for me, but my competence kept me in important rooms. My competence was important because if I wasn't good enough, everything I had built would be ruined after I did what I did. I found a way to contact her ex-boyfriend and asked him if he wanted me to raise his baby. I only asked that to see his reaction, but he admitted to being the father of the baby. He asked me to raise the kid if I wanted, told me to knock myself out, and swore that he would never get in my way. When that was out of the way, I went back to pretending to be interested in the wedding. I even took fake invitations for my parents and some members of my extended family, but I lied that they could not make the wedding rehearsal, but would be at the wedding. You know what's interesting? I wanted to make sure that I didn't hurt an innocent person. Her ex seemed incoherent anyway, so for all I knew, he may not have understood anything I said. So I decided to go through their phone conversations. I couldn't access her direct messages, so I checked her email. My ex sent her ex several messages begging him to take her back and accept his child. She said having a child out of wedlock would ruin her family's reputation, and she kept sending updates about the baby in her womb. The last message she sent to him was our wedding invitation. She told him that she was done and that he had finally made her settle for me. That was funny to me because I could never imagine actually marrying someone like her. Even if she hadn't gotten pregnant by another man, I still would not want her. On the day of the wedding rehearsal, I was to give a speech after the whole thing. It was while giving that speech that I mentioned that I was not the father of the child my ex was carrying, and that she tried to pin another man's child on me. Even as I said these words, a part of me hoped that I was making a mistake, and that she would defend herself and deny it. But she didn't. Her parents and their guests were embarrassed. After my speech, I walked out. Of course, the wedding did not hold, and the people there told other people who then told other people. It soon became an open secret why our wedding did not hold. You know what I love about this revenge? I structured it in such a way that I benefited from it. Being connected to her dad helped me meet other great people who helped me climb up in my career. Also, exposing her publicly like that did not just embarrass my parents, it also prevented me from being blacklisted by her dad. If I had ended the relationship privately, her dad wouldn't have to explain why he didn't want to see me anymore. All he would do is tell his friends and associates that I broke off my engagement with his daughter and I'd be blackballed. But after giving a reason publicly, I was viewed as the victim, and very few people wanted nothing to do with me. The rest acknowledged that I was a smart young man and was great at what I did. so they never stopped working with me. I got my revenge against my pathetic liar ex while still climbing up the social and career ladder. Best revenge ever. So I think the revenge working out the way OP wanted it to definitely relies on the dad's position in things. As in, if he was a very powerful or he was the top end-all be-all, he probably still could have had power to blacklist OP. Or if this was more of like a niche type job enterprise, probably would have been more sway because things would have just been so narrow. I think it's great that it worked out for OP, but it's not necessarily a go-to playbook if you somehow found yourself in a similar situation. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of revenge, it would be awesome if you left a like or left a review if you're listening to my podcast. That said, our next story is stealing packages should be a federal crime. Okay, package thieves are a menace, a huge one. You order something and you wait for weeks before it's delivered. Completely normal. You're excited because the day is finally here and Amazon tells you your order has been delivered. Also very normal. You walk outside and you wonder if your package is playing hide and seek with you. That's not normal. You reach out to Amazon and they show you a picture of your package at your doorstep. That's when you realize what happened. Your package has been stolen. This was my life 3 months ago until I got fed up. I'm Leah and I work from home. I switched from going to work in person to remote work after I celebrated my 23rd birthday. I decided that I didn't want to wake up early, get dressed, and sit at a desk from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day, so I quit my job. I got hired as a developer for a tech company so I could work remotely. I quickly realized I needed to create a workspace for myself at home so I could reduce distractions. I started checking online and asking questions from some of my friends who work from home. Before long, I had a list of everything I needed to get. I went on Amazon and found out that I could get everything I needed as long as I knew the specifications. That is how Amazon became my friend. I'd gotten a few things delivered without any delay or problems at first. My desk, chair, and table lamp had been delivered and were in good condition. I began to order decor items and other things to make my workspace exactly how I wanted when the problem started. I had ordered this cool and efficient keyboard to go with my desktop monitor and had been waiting a few days for it to arrive. Working on my laptop was no longer convenient because I needed to have multiple screens open, so I decided to upgrade my setup. I got the notification that my package was delivered to my doorstep while I was in the bathroom and went outside to pick up my package. I wasn't sure where it was placed since I didn't see it on my doorstep. I checked around the porch and in the driveway to see if I'd been assigned a reckless delivery driver. I found nothing. I quickly realized that my package had been stolen. I sent a message to the assigned delivery driver and he immediately replied with a picture of my package at my doorstep. I reported a stolen order and a replacement was sent. To my shock, it was stolen again, and I couldn't just ask Amazon for a replacement again. I decided to ask my neighbors if they'd seen my package or if it had been accidentally delivered to their houses instead. Our doorsteps are pretty similar, so I considered the possibility. I went to the house on my left and asked them if they had seen my package. They were kind enough to show me their CCTV footage since I didn't have a camera for my house yet. I checked around the time Amazon said they had delivered the replacement, and truly, there was nothing delivered to their doorstep. I thanked them and left. That meant that I had one neighbor left, the big bad wolf, Stella. Being neighbors with Stella was only bearable because I wasn't always home. However, when I was home, she always walked over with a complaint or another. One time, she banged down my door at 9 p.m. just to tell me that my car had left skid marks on my driveway. It was my driveway. We didn't share one and I didn't see why she was bothered about it. She gave me the most ridiculous reason. She said that she could see them when she took selfies with her phone. Seriously, what kind of stupid reason was that? I told her to take pictures backing the door from then on. I was so irritated that I slammed the door in her face. I already had a bad day at work. It was safe to say that Stella and I weren't friendly. That was why I was reluctant to go, but losing $300 and having no keyboard to show for it regardless meant that I had to try my best to find it. I walked up to Stella's door and knocked. She came outside and the smirk I knew so well was already on her face. I asked her as politely as possible if she had seen my package because I couldn't find it on my doorstep. She replied rudely and told me never to accuse her of stealing again. I told her it wasn't like that and I was simply trying to find my package. She said I should stop disturbing her, so I left. I assumed it was just some random package thief and I got unlucky twice. I continued to order these packages, but I tried different ways to protect my packages. The funniest attempt I made was me attempting to add a safe box on my porch. I had ordered that on Amazon as well, and guess who got their packages stolen? Me. I tried everything. I left a note for the delivery drivers to keep them under the stairs, behind the trash can, and even behind the patio chair. I tried everything possible and my packages kept getting stolen. You might be wondering why I didn't just go and pick up these packages myself. I was still trying to find the balance in working from home without giving into the laziness or distractions of being at home. I had to make a good impression at my new job, so I couldn't spare any time. My solution was to get a CCTV camera installed on my front porch. I got it a few days after I hit my $1,000 mark. I had lost approximately $1,000 in stolen packages, so I was tired. I installed a few more cameras around the house so I could have coverage all around. Then I got a few packages from Amazon and had delivered them to my porch as usual. I let the packages stay outside longer than I would have when I didn't have CCTV. When I went outside, I noticed that the packages were missing as usual. This time I wasn't really worried because everything I got was less than $50. It was a small price to pay for catching my package thief. I went inside to check the coverage, and what I saw made me shocked to the extent that I started to laugh. Stella was literally there searching my porch for packages. It was at that point that I realized she was my package thief all along. I laughed because she said I accused her of stealing when she didn't do it. It wasn't enough that she was rude to me and was an unbearable neighbor, she had the guts to steal from me as well. I was so going to make her pay, and before long, I came up with a perfect plan. A few months ago, I found out that my garage was infested with cockroaches. I was supposed to call pest control immediately, but work was so hectic that I forgot. I left my garage door open one morning by mistake because I was late for work and some of the cockroaches went out. They somehow found their way out and onto Stella's lawn. I heard from my other neighbor that Stella had freaked out so much that everyone on our block came out. As it turns out, Stella is deathly afraid of cockroaches and can pass out if they get too much. That was my ace. I didn't even know you could get cockroaches online until I actively invested in making Stella pay for stealing from me. I got the dubia cockroaches online. Please don't ask me where I got them. I made sure to get a full box of them. I got about 100 adult ones and opted for pickup. I did this because I didn't want Stella to steal the box before I could get the cockroaches stressed out and ready to jump out once the box was opened. After I picked it up, I went home and removed the tape from some of the Amazon boxes I hadn't disposed of. I opened the box and quickly taped a small camera before the cockroaches could scramble out and taped it shut with Amazon's tape. I waited until I saw Stella drive out before I dropped the package at my doorstep. I shook the box around a little before I dropped it. I ran back inside, and before I knew it, Stella was back and snooping around my driveway. She soon spotted the box, and the way she rushed to grab it made me angry. I wasn't bothered beyond that because I knew what was waiting for her. I recorded her stealing the box and waited for her to get inside before I went to the backyard and got close to her side of the house. I had barely waited 5 minutes when the scream came. It was so loud that pretty much everyone on my street must have heard Stella scream her lungs out. We all rushed to her door and asked what happened. Since I was the one who caused it, I told them all that happened. I told my neighbor the reason I did it, and he seemed to agree. Others did too, so I felt justified. Someone eventually pushed down the door, and we saw the strangest sight. Even I was horrified by what I saw. I almost started wondering if I'd taken it too far. Stella was passed out on the floor with the biggest cockroaches you have ever seen on her body and the floor. A few people ran out of the door because of how they hated cockroaches as well. But I waited. I removed the camera I had taped to the box with a gloved hand and connected it to the laptop I brought with him. As I had planned, the camera had captured Stella opening the box and finding out exactly what was inside. Apparently, the others have had cases of stolen packages as well, and they all suspected Stella of taking them. I wondered why someone would do that. While we waited for Stella to wake up after the paramedics showed up, I started noticing the things I had ordered around her house. My table plants, packs of pens and notes, journals, mini trash bin, and a portable shredder were right there around her home. The others also found some of the items they reported missing. We all decided to call the police and report Stella for theft. As one of us was calling the police, Stella woke up with a scream that scared all of us. She started yelling my name and called me a weirdo and a freak for bringing cockroaches into her house. I calmly asked her how she knew I ordered cockroaches when they weren't delivered to her house. She probably didn't pay attention because of her hysteria, but she confessed to all of us that she stole my packages. She also said that she stole our neighbor's packages as well. For someone who was accused of stealing, Stella was very unrepentant. I banished every feeling of pity I had for her when she said that she was going to sue me for harassing her. I told her I'd already beaten her to it when I gathered proof of her stealing. Besides, she confessed to stealing already, so that was more than enough. Stella was arrested for stealing and had to pay us all back for what she stole. She also had to call pest control because dubia cockroaches are very expensive to get rid of. Yes, stealing packages should be a federal crime, but until then, I don't think Stella will try to steal anyone's packages anymore. A bugged revenge is definitely what she needed. So unfortunately, in the United States, unless your package was delivered by the United States Postal Service, it actually is not a federal crime at all to steal an Amazon package or whatnot. In the US at least, I guess the most you can hope for is most states would take it seriously, package theft, and punish severely, but it doesn't surprise me that with politicians who are regularly 70 to 80 years old, getting new laws to cover contingencies like Amazon packages doesn't exactly happen overnight. I look at the European Union and look at their regulations like GDPR, data privacy, smartphones, charger standardization. I'm just like, can we get a little bit of that in the United States, please? Our next story is My Revenge in Detention. Back when I was in grade school, everything felt like it was split into two worlds. There were the popular kids, the jocks, all rich and shiny like they came from some other universe, and then there was the rest of us, just trying to get through the day without getting shoved into a locker or laughed at in the hallway. Yep, it was that bad. It didn't matter if you were the smartest in the room or something. Once the popular guys didn't like you or you didn't fit into their supposed circle of popular friends one way or the other, you were an outcast and you would pay for that every single day of school. It was like the usual case of bullying many people face in school that the school management and teachers often pretended not to see. And more than that, the whole popularity thing wasn't about just being liked, it was about power. And the jocks, led by this guy named Brad, they had all the power. They walked around like kings with their posse trailing behind them, ready to pounce on anyone who dared to challenge their reign. Me? As you can imagine, I was just a regular kid. I didn't fit into the popular gang because my parents were on average income. We didn't have the wealth that would draw the attention of the jocks to my side. And I wasn't really blessed with athletic powers that could have made up for my lack of family wealth. Even if being smart could have saved me, I didn't have that going for me either. I was your average-sized kid with an average-sized brain. I existed trying to blend into the background and avoid drawing any attention to myself. But that was easier said than done when you had someone like Brad constantly on your case. Brad wasn't particularly big or strong, but he had this way about him that made you feel small, like he could crush you with just a look. And he had his little minions, always hovering around him like flies, eager to do his bidding. It was irritating to see, especially when he could not be touched, even though there wasn't much difference between you and him. The one thing that made him fit into the crowd was that he was the one who basically started the gang in middle school, so he was kind of the revered one amongst them. Plus, his dad was a big-time contractor in another city. He had access to some of the best things that kids from middle-range income homes like me didn't. Every day was a battle just to survive. Brad and his gang would find new ways to make my life miserable, whether it was tripping me in the hallway or spreading rumors about me behind my back. It all felt like a never-ending game of tag where I kept getting picked on no matter how hard I tried to be invincible. It was worse for me than most kids because I was supposed to be friends with Brad. Or should I say that I was friends with him in the eyes of our parents? Our mothers were high school friends and they believed their boys would grow up to be best men at each other's weddings. Whenever they met up, they asked about school and hoped we were standing up for each other. They weren't entirely wrong about us being friends, at least not completely. When we were much younger, we were actually best of friends. But you know what happens with childhood friendships when one decides that the other was a stain on their reputation. Of course, I could not voice out about Brad's actions towards me in school. If I did, it would paint me as a weakling, more than he already thought of me. And that was the best case scenario. Worst case, he intensifies his abuse and bullying within the walls of the school. As the days went by, Brad's tormenting got worse, grade to grade. There was no end for him and his minions. It felt like he had a never-ending list of ways to make my life miserable. He would trip me in the hallway, slam my locker shut when I was trying to get my books, and laugh in my face whenever I tried to stand up for myself. There were days where I pretended not to be feeling well because I did not have the strength to deal with his shenanigans. And it wasn't just the words or the pranks. Brad didn't mind getting physical either. He would push me into lockers, shove me against walls, anything to show me who was boss. And his followers? They were always right there beside him, cheering him on like he was some kind of hero. Sometimes I felt that he did the silly things he did to make his minions happy, not that he enjoyed doing it. Other times I could see the satisfaction in his face glaring at me. I tried to fight back, to stand my ground against him, but it felt like I was fighting a losing battle. Brad had the whole school wrapped around his finger while I was just a nobody, alone and outnumbered. No matter how hard I tried to avoid him, Brad always found a way to make sure I knew my place. My place was beneath him, scrambling around to pick up the books that he'd knocked down from my hands repeatedly. With each passing day, it felt like I was sinking deeper and deeper into his shadow, trapped in a never-ending cycle of fear and humiliation. As the days dragged on, I could feel my frustration boiling over. Brad's constant tormenting was like a weight on my shoulders, dragging me down with every cruel word and every malicious prank. But instead of letting it crush me, I decided to fight back. I knew I couldn't take Brad on directly. He had too much power and too many followers ready to back him up, so I had to be smart about it. I had to find a way to get back at him without him even knowing it was me. That's when I came up with the plan. It was risky, sure, but I was desperate. I waited until mid-May when everyone was starting to get restless with the end of the school year looming ahead. And then, during theology class, I acted out. Now, let me give a background story to my school. The school I attended was somewhat of a church school. This was in the sense that the courses we took had additional Christian teachings to them. It wasn't like the normal grade school that you're probably familiar with. We had days of prayers and hours exclusively being taught the Word. And no, it wasn't a Bible school either. At best, I would describe it as a school for parents that had thought themselves to be fervent believers and wanted their kids to grow up in the same doctrine. The only issue was that the more they tried to make us Christ-like, the more devilish most of the students were. Especially the bullying part, which Brad was a king of despite his mother's obliviousness. So that was it. And at a point, I just got tired of getting beaten up. I wanted him to get punished. But you see, the thing with this type of school was that reporting to my parents or his parents was, say, 50% a problem. Reporting to the school authority was times 2 of that. There was no way they would take my word for it, and in the long run, once the army of supporters that rallied around Brad stood up in his defense, there was a high chance that I would be punished by the school to be made an example of, so that other students would learn not to point accusing fingers or lie to management. Of course, this is aside from the intense bullying you would get from the student following your outing. I needed something that would not involve me reporting or having to plead my case of abuse to anyone. It was the only way I could get Brad. Choosing to act out in theology class was not coincidental. I knew that getting in trouble would mean detention, but I needed to make sure it was lunch detention. Lunch detention was what we got for acting out in theology class. It was why people dreaded it. But this time, it was the perfect opportunity to put my plan into action. So, I made a scene, got myself sent to the principal's office, and made sure to plead my case just right to ensure I got the punishment I wanted. I was not scheduled to take my detention that day, and that gave me enough time to sleep on the decision I made. but every time I thought about the pain I would feel if the events were switched, and I remembered how much of a pain in the butt Brad had been for years, the empathy would face off. The next day, when lunch detention finally came around, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for, the chance to finally get back at Brad for everything he'd put me through. And I could not get caught. It was literally sentencing me to death. I made my way to the classroom, trying to act casual even though every step felt like it was echoing through the hallway. I could feel the weight of the plan resting on my shoulders, the pressure to pull it off perfectly, almost suffocating. Of course, he bumped into me in the hallway as I made my way to detention, calling me unprintable names at getting caught for throwing a little tantrum, but I knew what my goal was. I saw the detention as a necessary detour, and I pushed those thoughts aside as I slipped into the room and took my seat, trying to blend in with the rest of the kids serving their punishment. I had to stay focused, had to keep my eye on the prize. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the room grew thicker and thicker. I could feel the anticipation building within me. While the other students wanted the teacher to leave for a bit so they could sneak snacks into their mouths from their lockers, I wanted them to leave so I could steal the note. And then, finally, the moment arrived. The teacher stepped out of the room, leaving us unsupervised for the first time since we'd been confined to detention. I moved quickly, trying to keep my movements subtle as I made my way over to Brad's desk. My heart was pounding so loudly that I was sure everyone in the room could hear it, but I forced myself to stay calm, to keep my cool. Without hesitating for a second, I snatched it up, feeling a rush of adrenaline coursing through my veins as I held it in my hands. And then, with a flick of my wrist, I tossed it in the middle of my books. At the end of the day, I got home and destroyed the notes. The next day during the theology lesson, as I sat in class, I couldn't help but notice the frantic look on Brad's face. He kept fidgeting in his seat, rifling through his bag over and over again like he was searching for something he'd lost. And then it hit him. The realization washed over his face like a tidal wave, turning his expression from confusion to pure panic in an instant. He knew his notebook was missing, and he knew he was in deep trouble. Picking his theology notes was intentional. The same way acting out in theology class was bad, there were certain rules that guided our interactions in that class. It was a compulsory course to pass, and before exams, we had to tender our notes to the teacher in charge. When our teacher noticed that his notes were missing, he was thrown in indefinite 3 to 4 hours of daily detention. He was to use this time to write his notes again from scratch. It isn't much, I know, but it was a sweet revenge to see the pack of bullies without their alpha for a while. Honestly, I thought OP was going to end this story saying, I intentionally acted out multiple times, willingly skipping lunch just to keep getting this guy in trouble over and over again in theology class. I guess that's one nice side effect from going to a church school. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.